Get ready, Avalanche territory. Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans. Denver Sports is your home for the most Avalanche content. Now here's your host, Mike Evans.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into the Mile High Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Evans. Thank you for tuning in again. And I'll take you behind the curtain a little bit as to what goes on here, because just before I came on to do this Mile High Hockey Podcast, I was sitting off stage watching Zach By do his Mile High Hoops podcast. And I was struck listening to Zach talk about the worry meter of Nugget fans right now with the recent slump that the Nuggets have found themselves in. And it struck me, here's a Nuggets team that's number one in the Western Conference, on pace to have the best record, home court throughout the playoffs, and yet there's, real concern that somehow it's unraveling a little bit. And compare that and contrast that with the Avalanche, a team that is, in theory, still fighting to lock down a playoff spot, and how, there's concern, but it's a different kind of concern, isn't there? There's such a unproven nature to the Nuggets that we can't really trust them to get through this rough patch. Whereas with the Avalanche, this has been a recurring theme that we've had here on this podcast. The idea that whatever happens during the regular season, does it really, really matter? Or is it all about just getting to the playoffs? And so I kind of noticed that as I was listening to Zach talk about his worries about the Nuggets. I'm like, if I try to summon up that same kind of feeling of panic or worry with the Avalanche, I just can't get there. Now, maybe loyal viewer, you can, and you're already there. I'm not there yet. I still have this overall feeling about the Avalanche. Let's just get this regular season over with, can we please? And let's get on with the playoffs. But anyway, just a casual observation, take you behind the curtain a little bit about what was going on here before we came on to do this podcast. The news for the Avs, stop me if you've heard this before, another injury. Artturi Lehkonen, a triumphant return to Montreal. Everything was going perfect. Back to the place where he played for 6 years, had already scored 2 goals, got the video tribute, and you know how I feel about video tributes. I love video tributes. And it was just shaping up as a magical night for Lehkonen until he breaks his finger. And, geez, this Avalanche team, how they've been snake bit with these injuries, and now add him to the list. And the reports from Jared Bednar that he'll be out 4 to 6 weeks with finger surgery. Good news is that gets him back probably for the start of the playoffs. So, again, that kind of fits with my overall theme of, can we just get this regular season over with, especially before they lose anybody else. They're trying to get guys back, and just when it looks like, somebody's going to come back, Eric Johnson's been really ramping up his skating, then Lehkonen goes down. The Lehkonen one, and just to take a moment to talk about Artturi Lehkonen and what he's done. Boy, what another remarkable find by Joe Sakic, Chris McFarland, and this front office. You get a guy in Lehkonen who came over from Montreal last year, and I remember when the trade was made, it was immediately spun as, hey, here's a real feisty player, a real determined player, plays hard, works hard, pop in the occasional goal for you, not a prolific goal scorer, but just, guy you want to have on your team. Does a lot of things that don't always show up on the score sheet, but just, somebody you want if you're trying to win a cup. And boy, did that prove to be prophetic. He fit in perfectly, seamlessly, as so many of these Avalanche moves have proven to be the case over the last couple of years. But, you look at what Lehkonen was doing this year, 20 goals, career high, 20 goals, 29 points, 29 assists, 49 points, and was really, turning himself into what, if he'd been able to play the remainder of the season, maybe you're talking about somebody who's, flirting with 30 goals maybe. So just another example of, and it does kind of beg the whole, what comes first, what leads to what, chicken or the egg? Is it a case of some of these players that the Avalanche have brought in who just were ready to explode just needed a change of scenery, just needed to come here to take their game to another level? I'm thinking of Lehkonen. I'm thinking of Valeri Nichushkin. Or was it a case of, these guys just being given a chance to play with such outstanding talent and such a really good supporting cast? That's why their numbers came up. Hey, I'm not trying to take anything away from Nichushkin and Lehkonen, but let's be clear. They're playing with the kind of talent that Lehkonen didn't have in Montreal, that Nichushkin didn't have in Dallas, that they get here. But still, remarkable how Joe Sakic and the front office, Chris McFarland, being able to look at some of these guys and project another gear for them within the Avalanche system, talent. I think Devon Toews, another example of that. I think when they got Toews, it was kind of like, hey, good player, really good player, solid player, only had to give up a couple of second-round picks. But I don't think we expected him to be as good as he's been. So kudos again to the Avs front office, yet another example. But it does beg the question, after they were so good at the trade deadline last year and bringing in such impactful players, did they do enough this year? And will we lament the fact that they did not bring in somebody like a Lehkonen to be able to make the same kind of impact this time around, like a Josh Manson? We shall see. But the injuries, the sense of just getting this season over with. So as we're talking here right now, the Avalanche, there's no concern about them missing the playoffs, okay? Right now, they're in a battle with Winnipeg where they could easily go from being the finishing third in their division to finishing 8th overall and getting that final wild card spot. But they could still move up and catch Minnesota for number 2. The fact is they're going to be in the playoffs because if you're looking at beyond Winnipeg, that 8th spot, the teams that are trying to climb up, Nashville, Calgary, teams like that, the Avs are still a solid 7 points ahead of them. So they're not going to miss the playoffs. I'll do the obligatory knock on wood, but I really don't think you have to worry about it as an Avalanche fan. So then it really just comes down to, all right, if it remains kind of an up and down season to the finish line where you get an inspired performance followed by a flat performance, what do we make of all that? And it's a team that until I can't trust them, I'm going to trust them. And it's a team that come playoff time, I'm going to expect a different team. I think we've seen examples of this throughout the course of the season where they've sort of picked their spots where you can tell that they've got a little bit extra juice. And I thought the trip to Montreal was a great example of that, right? So this is Montreal. This is the hockey cathedral of the world. A lot of these guys, Canadian players, Canadian-born players. Alex Newhook had I think 25 to 30 friends and relatives at the game. It's just playing in Montreal, especially when you're a Western Conference team and you only get to do it one time. That trip to Montreal and then the following trip to Toronto, this is a big deal. And if you've never been to Canada during hockey season or been in a town like Montreal or Toronto during hockey season, there's nothing like it. I mean, really, there is nothing like it. I've been to Montreal a couple times during the hockey months, and this was when Montreal was still really good. But even now, there is such a passion. I don't know how to best sum it up. Here in Denver, you've got the passion that we've all become accustomed to when it comes to the Broncos, right? Denver's always been a Bronco town. Still doesn't come close to the amount of just energy and passion and scrutiny that follows the Canadiens in Montreal, the Maple Leafs in Toronto. And so when you go back there to play as a visiting team, especially the defending Stanley Cup champs, I mean, there's so much more media. The locker room, the dressing room is much busier than it normally would be. The press conferences are much more attended. The people who are covering really know their hockey, very serious about it. Questions are very direct. And I think in this case, the Avalanche, enjoy that. It's a real break from the monotony of the season, being able to go up there and play in this environment. And I think it proof that you've seen some examples, like when they went to New York to play the Rangers earlier this season. They had that, and I know it's been sporadic throughout the season, and it probably bugs a lot of you as fans. Like, why has the intensity been such a roller coaster? I just think it's what goes into trying to repeat, and then add in the injuries. Know you're going to be in the playoffs. Know that you probably don't really care about what the matchup's going to be. You're confident that you can beat anybody in the West. Doesn't matter if you have home ice or not. So I really, and I've been accused by some of you as having a too much of a laissez-faire attitude, too much of a hey, nothing to see here type attitude. Believe me, if the playoffs roll around and this team is scuffling and there doesn't seem to be the same kind of motivation, I'll call them on it. But I just think for a team that won a Stanley Cup seemingly yesterday, I can't hammer them right now. I just can't. I think it would be unfair, and I think it would show a lack of respect to a team that proved themselves in winning the Stanley Cup and should be given the benefit of the doubt until they show they can't do it. Now, just because I'm giving them kind of a regular season pass doesn't mean that that's going to continue on in the playoffs, because even with some of the injuries, I don't think that's an excuse for falling short in the playoffs. I still believe that their team, even with some of the guys they're missing, still better than anybody else in the West. And I'm still expecting their best players to play to that level. And it's funny, I think Tampa has kind of not ruined it, but has certainly set a standard for teams that win a cup and the expectation of what you do the next year. Because Tampa, I think we all at one point, at least at one point, maybe more, during the Stanley Cup Finals last year, was like, wow, this team is in their third straight Stanley Cup Final. They've won two. They're in their third. They've had a bunch of short off seasons, long regular seasons, yet here they are again. And so part of me would look at a team like the Avalanche as a reigning Stanley Cup champion and just said, it's tough to repeat. Right? I mean, look at all sports. All sports, it's tough to repeat. And so because it's so hard to repeat in other sports, probably should give the Avs a bit of a pass, right? Well, but this is hockey. And Tampa's shown that, you can get back to the Stanley Cup Finals 3 straight times. You can win them a couple in a row. And so with kind of using Tampa as the standard, I have high expectations for the Avalanche this year. It isn't just simply a matter of, you won a Stanley Cup last year, so that gives you like a 5-year grace period to just kind of, miss the playoffs or come up short in the playoffs, but we'll always have the Stanley Cup. No, I have high standards for this hockey team, and I will hold them to that standard once the playoffs start. But again, I do know, have covered sports long enough to know that the human nature part of it is something that you can't overlook. And this team, having had the Stanley Cup, partying all summer long, short off season, jumping back into the grind of 82 games, the injuries that come with it, looking around the West, knowing how you kind of match up with the teams, knowing that there isn't another behemoth in this Western Conference, I think leads just human nature-wise to a lot of things that we've seen this season. I know it's been frustrating at times for you Avalanche fans, but at the risk of coming across as being too Pollyannish, relax, be cool. We'll get through this. You can see the finish line. The regular season's almost over. Then we'll get into the playoffs, and then we'll see what this team is really about. And we'll have the high expectations, even if they're missing some key guys with injuries. A couple of the quick notes with the Avs. With Arturi Lehkonen being out for the next 4 to 6 weeks, Alex Galchenyuk will be brought up from the minors, where he's been playing well. He'll take his spot. We'll see some other probably different line combinations, guys moved up, see how that works. Another guy I want to call out who I think is playing exceptionally well right now is Bo Byram. Another terrific game against the Canadiens. This kid looks legit. And I know we went down this road with Sammy Girard. Girard got paid. Girard has always been kind of like, all right, what's next? What's next? Is there more? You're going to give me more? Constantly talked about his possible trade bait. Bo Byram. Let's just, again, knock on wood. Let's give good health for this kid because he looks like he could be really special. And you think about looking ahead to the playoffs, and you think about everything the Avs have, but then you have a defensive core made up of Makar, Byram, Taze. Hopefully get Manson back. Even add in a Sammy Girard, but with the expectation that he doesn't have to be, one of your premier players. I don't know. There's again a lot to like back there, and get Eric Johnson back, and we know the contributions he makes. There's a lot of reasons to still feel good about this hockey team. We'll see how they do as they continue on with their Canadian swing. Really looking forward to seeing this game against Toronto. Again, a Toronto team that, boy, you talk about pressure, man. You talk about playoff pressure. Holy smokes. This would be like, I'm trying to make an equivalent. I guess I'll come back to the Broncos again. This would be like the Broncos having not won a Super Bowl in over 50 years, and having a team over the last couple of years that is definitely on the short list of Super Bowl contenders, and then getting into the playoffs and all the pressure. I mean, just imagine it. As a Bronco fan, which many of you are, imagine under that kind of scenario, the pressure that would be on the Broncos. All right, take that, ratchet it up probably, 5-10 times more for what Toronto, the Maple Leafs, are experiencing right now. Incredible pressure, incredible scrutiny, and they're looking at a first-round matchup with Tampa. Whew, they got to hate this playoff format, but That's the team the Avalanche will be playing. We'll have a chance to respond to that game. Be very curious. Again, another game which I think you'll see the Avs bring their best just because of the intensity of the situation. And that's good because I think if you go into these kind of situations where you could tell that there's a little extra energy in the building, if the Avalanche submit a real flat performance in a game like that, then I think you could easily hey, where's the panic button? I need to keep it close. But as long as they come out and match the intensity of the moment, I think that kind of gives you a good idea about what to expect come playoff time when everybody's ready to go, including the Avs. So that'll do it for this week's edition of the Mile High Hockey Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Want to thank Sean Gates for putting all this together, engineering, producing. You wear many hats over there. I thank you. I thank you very much. We'll see you again next week. Mike Evans here on the Mile High Hockey Podcast.